Sometimes the summer we wait for our whole lives turns into the one we'll never forget, not because of love or laughter, but because of the silence that follows when someone disappears. Stephen could feel it in the air before he even said a word. That heavy weight that makes it hard to breathe, the kind that tells you something is wrong even before you know what it is. Conrad was sitting across from him, calm on the outside, but Stephen's heart raced like he was about to start a storm with just a single sentence. The truth was burning inside his chest, and no matter how much he wanted to hold it back, he knew he couldn't keep it hidden any longer. The longer he waited, the heavier it became, pressing down on him like the summer heat that never lets up. The house was quiet, too quiet for a night at Cousins'. No laughter spilling through the walls. No music from Jeremiah's playlist filling the air. No footsteps running up and down the stairs. That silence was the cruel reminder. Something was missing. Someone was missing. Stephen had searched for the right way to say it, but there was no right way, not for news like this. He had walked the same path over and over in his head, tried to imagine Conrad's reaction, tried to soften it, but each attempt ended the same way. He saw Conrad's world breaking. He thought back to the last time he saw Jeremiah, the way his smile made everything seem easy, the way his voice carried a kind of hope that made people believe summer could last forever. But now that smile was gone, that hope stolen by the sudden void of his absence. Stephen remembered the texts, the unanswered calls, the rising panic when hours turned into a day, the moment it stopped being nothing and turned into everything. And now he was here, standing at the edge of tearing apart the only family that still felt whole. Conrad looked up, sensing Stephen's unease. His eyes searched, curious at first, then more serious. It was always hard to hide anything from him. He could read Stephen like a book, could pick up on every shift, every pause. "What is it?" Conrad finally asked, his voice low but steady, like he was bracing for something. Stephen opened his mouth, closed it again, fighting to find the strength. The words felt jagged, too sharp to speak, but silence was worse. His chest rose and fell, his jaw clenched, and then, quietly, he began to let it out. There's a moment, just before you break the news, when time feels strange. The seconds stretch long, but your thoughts rush fast, colliding and tangling, making it hard to focus on anything but the truth you're carrying. Stephen felt that weight twisting inside him. His throat was dry, his stomach tight. He wanted to protect Conrad from the pain, but protecting him meant lying. And lying meant letting the fear grow bigger than both of them. And so, he let go of the last bit of hesitation he had been holding on to, and the first words began to form on his lips, trembling as though the night itself didn't want to hear them. The words hung between them before they were even spoken. Stephen's lips parted, and Conrad could already sense that this wasn't just another late-night confession, not some trivial summer story. It was heavier than that, heavier than the walls around them, heavier than the ocean outside that kept crashing as if it already knew. Stephen's voice came out softer than he expected, almost like it was borrowed, not his own, but the softness didn't make it easier. In fact, it made it worse. "Conrad, Jeremiah's not here." It wasn't enough. Conrad frowned, waiting for more, the silence demanding an explanation. His chest tightened as he leaned forward. His eyes locked on Stephen like he was searching for the missing pieces in the spaces between his words. Stephen forced himself to continue, every syllable like dragging stones across his tongue. "He didn't come back last night. I've tried calling. I've tried texting. Nothing. He's not answering. No one's seen him since yesterday." The room swallowed the confession. It didn't echo, didn't move. It just sat there, thick and unyielding, filling every corner like smoke. Conrad didn't react right away. He didn't even blink. It was as if his brain had pressed pause, refusing to let the sentence in. He wanted to believe it was nothing, that Jeremiah was off with friends, that he'd show up laughing like always, holding a drink in one hand and tossing some careless joke into the air. That was Jeremiah. That was who he had always been. But the look on Stephen's face told a different story, one without laughter, without comfort. Conrad pushed back in his chair, his body suddenly restless, his fingers tapping against the table as if motion could undo what he'd just heard. "You're saying he's missing?" His voice cracked slightly at the word. It sounded foreign, dangerous. "Missing. That wasn't a word you threw around in summer." Missing belonged to headlines, not two brothers. Stephen nodded, his throat too tight to speak again right away. He hated the word as much as Conrad did, but there was no other way to name it. Jeremiah wasn't just late. He wasn't just avoiding calls. He was gone, and the fear in Stephen's chest had been growing like a shadow he couldn't outrun. He had tried to hide it all day, had tried to pretend it was nothing, but now the truth was in the open. And it was bigger than either of them. Conrad stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sharp sound cut through the stillness like a blade. His breath came fast, his hands flexing, restless with energy he couldn't control. He started pacing, his footsteps quick and uneven. Every step was a battle between panic and denial. He wouldn't just disappear. Not Jeremiah. He wouldn't do that to me. To us. To his voice broke. The name caught in his throat before it could be said aloud. He bit it back, turning away, staring out the window as if the answer might be waiting in the darkness outside. Stephen wanted to reach out, to anchor him, but he stayed where he was, his own body frozen with guilt. He felt like he had failed already, like he should have stopped this from happening, like he should have seen it coming. His mind replayed every detail of the past day, every little thing Jeremiah had said or done, searching for clues that might explain why, or how, or where he could be now. But no matter how hard he searched, the picture stayed blank. Conrad pressed his palms against the glass, his reflection staring back at him, pale and fractured in the dim light. His shoulders shook, but his face was set, holding back the flood. "We have to find him," he whispered, almost to himself at first, but then louder, sharper. Turning back to Stephen with eyes that burned, "We have to do something. We can't just sit here." Stephen nodded quickly, almost too quickly, as if agreeing could erase the helplessness he felt. He wanted to promise Conrad everything, to say they'd find Jeremiah before the night ended, that it would all go back to the way it was. But promises were dangerous now. Promises felt like lies wrapped in hope. And the last thing either of them could survive was another lie. Still, he found the courage to answer, his voice low but steady, even if his heart wasn't. We'll find him. I'm not letting this go. Not for a second." For a moment, their eyes locked, both of them standing on the same cliff edge, neither knowing how far the fall would be. But the fear in their gaze was matched by something else, determination, fierce and raw. Jeremiah was gone, but as long as they were breathing, they wouldn't stop until he was back. The night outside pressed against the windows like it was listening. Every shadow seemed thicker, every sound sharper, as though the world itself was holding its breath along with them. Conrad hadn't sat back down since Stephen told him. His energy pulsed through the room, restless and jagged, like a storm bottled up in a too small space. Stephen watched him pace, the floor creaking under every step, and wished he could pull the words back into his mouth. Rewind the night, start over, but there was no one doing it. Jeremiah was missing, and now they both had to carry it. Conrad finally stopped pacing and turned back to Stephen. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "We're wasting time." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharp edge that cut through the heavy air. Stephen blinked, startled by the urgency. Wasting time doing what? Just sitting here. Jeremiah could be anywhere. What if he's hurt? What if Conrad cut himself off? Shaking his head as if the thought itself was poison. He couldn't say it. He wouldn't. Stephen stood slowly, his legs heavy but steady. I've already checked his phone. No new messages. His car's still outside. It doesn't make sense. The facts tumbled out, each one colder than the last. Every detail pointed to the same conclusion. Jeremiah hadn't just wandered off. Something bigger, something darker, was pulling at the edges of the truth. Conrad's eyes burned with frustration. "So what do? We can't just sit around waiting for him to come back." The room felt smaller with every second, like the walls were closing in, pressing them closer to decisions neither of them wanted to make. Stephen swallowed hard. "We'll retrace his steps. Start from yesterday. Someone had to see him. Someone knows something." His voice steadied as he spoke, the weight of guilt turning into determination. For the first time that night, Conrad stopped moving. His shoulders rose and fell, his breath unsteady, but there was a flicker of clarity in his eyes. "Okay. We start now. We go everywhere he could have been. We don't stop until we know." The urgency in his voice lit a fire under both of them. Conrad grabbed his jacket, his movements sharp, as if motion alone could beat back the fear creeping in. Stephen followed, his chest heavy but his mind racing ahead. Every memory of Jeremiah flashed like snapshots, his laughter at the pier, his voice echoing down the hallway, the way he leaned against the railing at sunset, carefree, untouchable. Those images felt like ghosts now, reminders of what was slipping further away with each minute. Outside, the air was colder than it should have been for summer. The waves crashed against the shore, louder, rougher, as if echoing their panic. The streetlights stretched shadows across the road, and each corner they turned felt like a question without an answer. Conrad walked ahead with quick strides, his jaw set, his body tensed like he was fighting an invisible clock. Stephen trailed behind, his eyes darting into every alley, every dark space, half expecting Jeremiah to appear, smiling, ready to laugh at how worried they'd been. But no such comfort came. They retraced the path Jeremiah had taken the day before. The boardwalk, where his sneakers had slapped against the wood as he teased Stephen about his terrible aim at the arcade. The diner, where he had left his Haffiton fries and promised to be back later. The beach, where his footprints faded into the tide like they had been waiting to disappear. Each place felt emptier than the last, as if Jeremiah's absence had hollowed them out. Conrad's frustration grew with every step, his silence heavier than words. At last, he stopped and turned to Stephen, his voice breaking through the night. "What if we're already too late?" The question slipped out before he could catch it, and once spoken, it lingered. Cruel and unshakable, Stephen's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to answer. "We can't think like that. If we give up now, then he really is gone. We have to believe he's out there, that he's waiting for us to find him." His words trembled, but there was steel beneath them. He had to believe it, for both their sakes. Conrad stared at him, searching his face for something, faith, certainty, anything to hold on to. And for the first time since the night began, a flicker of trust passed between them. Not in the situation, not in the odds, but in each other. The silence stretched again. But this time it wasn't a suffocating. It was the silence before a decision. The quiet that comes when two people realize they're about to step into the unknown together. Conrad nodded, his eyes hardening. "Then we keep going. We don't stop, not until Jeremiah's back." And just like that, the night around them shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a promise. The night deepened, and the town seemed to fold in on itself. The familiar streets of Cousins taking on a strangeness they had never noticed before. Every light flickering in the distance looked like it might belong to him. Every echo of footsteps made their hearts jump, only to dissolve into nothing but empty air. Conrad and Stephen pushed forward anyway, their determination carrying them through exhaustion, through fear, through the heavy silence that clung to every place Jeremiah should have been but wasn't. At the pier, they found his sweatshirt draped across the railing, the one he wore almost every other night when the ocean breeze turned sharp. The fabric was damp, clinging to the wood like it had been forgotten in a hurry. Conrad froze when he saw it, his face tightening as he reached out and grabbed the sleeve. He held it close, like it was proof that Jeremiah had been here, that he was still real and not just some ghost they were chasing through the shadows. "He wouldn't just leave this," Conrad muttered, his voice low, almost breaking. "Not him." Stephen's throat tightened. The sweatshirt was too much like a breadcrumb, a signal, a trace of someone who didn't want to be lost, or worse, someone who didn't get the choice. His eyes scanned the water, dark and endless, the waves swallowing everything they touched. Fear pricked at his skin. "We don't know what it means yet," Stephen said carefully, though inside he was spiraling. It could be nothing. It could mean he just... His words trailed off because he didn't believe them. Neither of them did. Conrad's grip on the sweatshirt only grew tighter. His eyes flickered with something fierce, something dangerous, a refusal to let despair take root. "He's out there," he said firmly, as though saying it aloud might will it into truth. "And I'll find him, no matter what it takes." The hours bled together as they searched, each corner of town yielding more questions than answers. At the old arcade, the lights still humming faintly, Stephen spotted Jeremiah's keychain on the ground, the one shaped like a sunburst. He crouched down, picking it up with trembling fingers, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. It was warm from the pavement, as if it hadn't been lying there long. He looked up at Conrad, and the fear in both their eyes mirrored the other. The world wasn't just empty of Jeremiah anymore. It felt like it was taunting them with fragments of him, scattered pieces leading them forward, but never to the whole. Their search carried them to the edge of the woods behind the beach, a place they had all run through countless times as kids, daring each other to venture deeper. But tonight it wasn't the same. The trees pressed in like walls, their branches clawing at the sky, their shadows pooling thick on the ground. Stephen hesitated, his stomach twisting. "What if we don't come out with answers?" he whispered, more to himself than to Conrad. Conrad didn't pause. His steps were steady as he pushed past the first row of trees, the sweatshirt still gripped in his hand like a lifeline. "Then we keep looking until we do." His voice carried through the darkness, not loud, but certain in a way that anchored them both. The woods were alive with unfamiliar sounds, the snap of branches, the rustle of unseen movement, the far-off call of something neither of them could name. Each noise jolted them, feeding the tension already stretched tight. Stephen's flashlight beam wavered, sweeping across tree trunks and tangled roots, catching glimpses of things that looked too much like movement. But it was always nothing. Always the night playing its tricks. Still, every step forward felt like walking deeper into the unknown. Like they were chasing not just Jeremiah, but the truth that had been hiding in the shadows all along. At last, they stumbled onto a clearing, the moonlight breaking through in pale silver beams. And there, carved into the dirt, were fresh footprints. 2 sets. One lighter, one heavier. Conrad dropped to his knees, his chest heaving as he stared at them. His fingers traced the edges of the prints, desperate for answers. He was here, he said, his voice thick. Someone was with him. The words cut through Stephen like glass. Someone was with him. The thought wasn't just frightening, it was a new kind of terror. Because if Jeremiah hadn't left alone, then someone else knew where he was now. Someone else was part of this story. Conrad looked up, his face pale but his eyes burning with fire. "We're not stopping," he said, his voice shaking but fierce. "I don't care who it is, or what it takes. I'm going to bring him back." And in that moment, Stephen knew it too. Whatever mystery had swallowed Jeremiah, whatever darkness had pulled him from their world, they were already in it now. They couldn't turn back, couldn't stop, couldn't breathe until they found him. The night around them felt charged, as though it was only the beginning of something bigger, something far more dangerous than they had imagined. The footprints stretched into the woods like a path waiting to be followed, and as Conrad and Stephen stepped forward, side by side, the summer they thought they knew slipped further away, replaced by a truth that was waiting in the dark, ready to change everything.